that you're here together because it means that we are here together. And that's what everybody's going to tell you. They've already done it. I'll repeat it at the end. I take as my task here to answer some questions about what the election and the new government coming in on Monday, what it's going to be doing and why it's doing it and what we can expect. And so I want to
Honestly,
begin.
Chad, I'm just having fun talking about shit I want to talk about today. I'm not talking about like the dumb news or drama of the day. This is kind of a standard Central Committee stream. We talk about what I want to talk about, you know? And it is what it is, you know? I'm sure there's some like very dumb lib story I could be vlogging right now, but I don't feel like it. We're going to watch Richard Wolff.
By telling you that partly what I'm going to say is going to upset you. And so I want you to remember that I'm just the messenger. I didn't make these things happen, but I...
Speaking of just a messenger, I didn't make these things happen. The far-right party Reform has now pulled into the lead in the polls in the UK. They are now projected to be the largest party in the parliament, going from 5 seats to 238. Labour projected to lose 312 seats, down to 99, and the Conservative Party being the opposition at 153. The Green Party projected to have only 7 seats because, you know, first past the post. As predicted, the center-right neoliberal Biden-copying Starmer party has had the fastest collapse in support in British history. Now, they don't have to run elections for like another 4.5 years, but if elections were held today, it would be the biggest defeat in the history of the center-left in Britain, going back to like the fucking Whigs. How do I feel about having the lunatic in charge of the NIH? We're fucked. We're fucked. Neoliberal centrism has led to the rise of the far right. And the United States of America is perilously close to outright failure. I think one of the things that I kind of find interesting is a lot of liberals and even leftists kind of seem like they don't believe that leftism is like analysis is correct. If the Republicans pursue right-wing policy, you understand that the United States is going to be worse off, right? And less powerful, right? And it's going to suck more, right? Like, cutting taxes on the rich is not going to cause like a good economic system, like a good economy. It's going to cause asset bubbles. It's going to cause, you know, there's going to be some sort of crash. Like, things are going to get worse. It's going to be bad. Like, it's, you know, people are going to be able to see that these things suck. They're hardening the contradictions. And so your job is to prepare for the opportunities that lie ahead. People's comfort from their paychecks, well, that's what's going to be at risk. Do you think that increasing the fragility of our economic system by reducing government spending and reducing regulation is going to make your jobs more secure or less secure?
I do want to honestly tell you, if you would like a much more comfortable version of this, then just turn on your television or radio whenever you have a free moment on the toilet, and you can hear the make-believe. Because we live now in a weird time, weirder and in different ways from what we were used to. This country is, as Dr. Leon I keep wanting to call him Wilmer because we've gotten to be friends. But yeah, as he pointed out, we live in a time of decline. And then when an empire declines, which is something we haven't gone through because empires don't decline very often. So, but let me tell you from the history books, a little bit we can tell, it's not fun to be in a declining empire. Much more fun when the empire is going up, which was the last century or a century and a half of this country, the ride up. We are now on the ride down. We haven't been prepared because we have leaders who cannot say a word about that. I want to just drive that home because the split in this country is really about that. So let me start with the split in the obvious way. This Monday, we are having a national celebration of two key events. One that you hear about every day, all day, the inauguration of a new president. It's also the anniversary of the assassination of Martin Luther King. Same day. Wow, how different one celebration from the other. Who's celebrating what? You might say, and you wouldn't be far wrong, that those celebrating Mr. Trump
Are celebrating the
probably
assassination.
also celebrating the assassination of Mr. King.
Yeah.
And those that are mourning one are likely also mourning the other one of those two events. But it's a country split between those on the one side of that and those on the other. And that split is everywhere now. And if you haven't noticed it yet, you will, because it's going to impact your life in all kinds of ways. So one of them to start, is a little bit about what a declining empire means, just to give you the context. The United States lost the war in Vietnam. When I say that in my classes, my students look at me. They've never heard such a thought. America, as they know from the comic books they read as children, only wins wars. It doesn't lose wars, but we lost. The war was fought against the Communist Party of North Vietnam, which has been running that country since the United States was driven out in 1975. Go check all of this. You will find I'm not making it up. After we lost the war in Vietnam, we went and had a big war in Afghanistan, which we also lost. That war was against the Taliban, which now runs that country, which is a good sign that you lost. We lost the war in Iraq. We are in the process of losing the war in Ukraine. But the split in the country is, if I were in certain audiences, I wouldn't dare say what I just said, because they couldn't hear it. They could not hear it. And I wouldn't be able.
Just so you understand what he's saying, this is the ambassador to South Vietnam.
Personally, I'm embarrassed. I'm embarrassed that the United States of America is being humiliated and is leaving an area that we had come to defend, and we've been defeated. Personally, I'm embarrassed. I'm embarrassed that the United States of America is being humiliated and is leaving an area that we had come to defend, and we've been defeated.
That is the South Vietnamese ambassador describing fleeing Saigon in 1975 in front of the advancing North Vietnamese military as the South Vietnamese government collapsed without American intervention.
Able to get anything else across, so I couldn't start that way. I'm a teacher. I'm not going to try to lose my audience before I begin. But it is the reality. Let me give you a couple of more, just bits of getting what decline means. Last week, something happened on the part of a country called Indonesia. I don't know if you're familiar with it. It's a remarkable country in Asia, made up of 18,000 islands in the Pacific. It's a huge country. The population of Indonesia is 280 million people. Makes it one of the largest countries in the world. Let me remind you, the population of the United States is 330 million. 280 isn't that far less than 330. It's an enormous thing what they did. They joined the BRICS. They joined a full partner of the BRICS. BRICS, by the way, means it's the first letters of the countries Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. A dozen years ago, they began to form an alliance of what came to be called the Global South, to be independent, relatively, from the domination of the United States. And the core economy there, the biggest one, the most powerful, is, I'm sorry to tell you this, I know it'll come as an upset, the People's Republic of China. Remember, I'm the messenger. I have no responsibility for this at all. China and the BRICS. Indonesia joined them. Together now, the BRICS, built around China, have as the population of the countries that are part of the BRICS, about 22 countries now altogether. They have about 55 to 60% of the population of the world are members. What is the percentage of the world's population of the United States? 4.5%. You understand? We are 4.5%. They are 50 to 60%. In the words of, Mickey Mouse, those odds are not so good, no matter how you cut it. And as a group, let me tell you how you cut it. We in economics have this little game. We ask, what is the total output in goods and services in a year of a country? Gives us a kind of rough idea of how big a country it is, how important its footprint is in the world. Okay, so if you take the BRICS, together now, they are about 35%, maybe a bit more, total output of the world. If you add up each of those countries' total output in a year, and you add them up, they account for 36%, more or less, of the world's output. Now let's compare that to the United States and its major allies. Those are called the G7, the group of seven. The United States, Japan, Canada, Britain, France, Italy, and Spain. And Britain, excuse me. Okay, that used...
Nah, I hate this motherfucker. He's only building onto an understanding of history that a conflict between the United States and China is inevitable for the U.S. If you know Professor Wolff, you know that he would be against it. He would be against such a conflict. But he's just analyzing the reality that the U.S. is being supplanted by China, and that the theory of and that the United States and its imperialist, running dogs are not going to give it up without being forcibly supplanted. And it is the United States that is aggressing on China. It is the United States that's building bases right off the coast of China. It isn't China building bases right off the coast of the United States. It is the United States that's trying to deny China development, not China trying to deny the United States development. The U.S. is aggressive towards China because they see China as a legitimate threat to their power.
Used to be the dominant player of the world. That used to be what world trade meant, what they did. Together that's all of them, now account for about 28% of the world's output. Do you understand? The BRICS is now what the United States was, but is no more. Now, if you're looking to where the wealth is, you go east, not west. If you're a poor third world country, as we used to call them, and you need money for a build railroad, or you need to find places to sell your exports, you direct your diplomats first to go to Beijing, because that's where it's at. If you can't get a good deal there, well, you might go to London or Washington. But whatever you are doing, you're going to play them against each other. You're going to say to the Americans, oh, that's the best you offer? Let's go to the other place, see what they offer. You want to know why most of the railroads being built in Africa today are being built by the Chinese? There's your answer. They got a better deal. Everything is changing because of this, except here, where the make-believe is the way this country is dealing with this. Denial. We ought to ask Dr. Fra to help us with the understanding psychologically. We all know it from our personal lives, right? When we've lost a friend or a lover, and we had to wait until all our friends told us what we couldn't face ourselves. Well, we are the friends in this country who are being unable to vent. That's why what Indonesia did last week is something I'm not going to ask how many of you noticed it, because nobody will raise their hand. How could you? Make-believe made sure that that was not on the newspaper's front page, or in most newspapers on any page ever. How many of you know that the Chinese are now the fast-growing dominant economy in the world? We're not. We haven't been for a while. Every major high-tech firm in this country has an analog. Has an analog in China. When we heard earlier that there was an offer by China and by Russia to work with the United States earlier, which the United States turned down, that's part of denial. They didn't just turn it down then, they turned it down now. One more example, and then I'll stop and tell you what this all means. 15 years ago, every automobile company on this planet went to work trying to develop what they understood was the next wave in that business, which was putting aside the gasoline-powered car and substituting an electric-operated car or truck.
Now we know that electric cars and trucks can do pretty much almost everything your standard internal combustion engine truck or car can do. And have we moved beyond internal combustion engines? No. On the contrary, the conservatives have developed a culture where they try to call it gay. And Donald Trump is basically trying to incentivize people to buy gasoline vehicles. The technology is inferior in every way, except in certain niche purposes, than an electric vehicle. And hybrid vehicles are superior in every way to internal combustion engine vehicles. And yet, what is happening? I need you to roll coal.
By the way, not a rational response, because it's terribly wasteful to have that vehicle, which those of you who have it notice, sits on the street or in the garage most of its life. That's kind of, let's use a fundamental word, stupid. It's stupid. It's a waste of resources. That car could serve 20 people each day if it were managed properly. What do I mean managed properly? Well, like a car rental business, that's how they would manage that. Or those bicycles we can now just take off the rack and put back on. That's a rational way. If you want to avoid killing people, which private cars do, if you want to avoid air pollution, cars are the major cause of it, and on and on. Rational would be to go from the private car to a mass transit efficient system. A beautiful train every 5 minutes, a beautiful bus, even more beautiful, every 3 minutes, everywhere. That's it. Infinitely cheaper, much more efficient.
He's
and
right.
None of you have to worry about it, because wherever it's parked in the central lots, which we call car rental centers, there would be paid mechanics who make sure they're in proper condition. So the car would be in better shape, better cared for. The whole thing is nuts. And who is the person who invented this crazy
I mean, and he's right. Like, most of the time, cars, like, I own one car, and it sits idle 95% of the time. It sits in a parking space, idle 95% of the fucking time. Until VO needs eggs. Yeah, true.
Solution to the fuel-burning car? That genius who did this terrible thing, Elon Musk. That's what he did. He found a way that automobile companies could make a profit by taking us out of gas cars into electric cars. So 15 years ago, all the car companies said, hooray, here's how we hold on to our profits by making these private cars for everybody. And they all went to work to compete. And there was a winner. As of 3 years ago, one company figured out how to make the best quality electric cars and trucks and at the lowest price, which is what competition is supposed to result. And I'm sure you all know the name of this company. It's the BYD Corporation. Let me do that again. B as in boy, Y as in yellow, D as in dog, BYD. Now, your faces give you away. You never heard of this place or this thing. What is it?
Isn't it better for you not to drive your car as much as possible? I thought you want to keep miles low on Lambos for a better chance to resell. I'm gonna reach through my monitor and choke you. Like I'm going to develop the psychic energy to like go in Minecraft.
Well, what did I just tell you? They won the competition for the entire new wave of cars and trucks moving across this planet every day by the millions. And you never heard of them. Why? Because they move everywhere except here. If you go to Europe right now, you'll see them all over the roads. BYD, and by the way, there's several Chinese car companies. They're not the only one. They're just the ones who did it best. Why don't you see them? Because we have a tariff started by Mr. Trump, raised by Mr. Biden. The tariff on the Chinese electric vehicles is 100%. So let me explain quickly what that means. The Chinese produce this wonderful thing, this electric vehicle, and let's take a simple number, $30,000 is what they cost for the car. You're an American. You need, therefore, to come up with $30,000 if, for example, you're a company that uses electric trucks to do part of your business. It's an input. You'd have to come up with $30,000 to get the truck. And then you'd have to pay 100%. Another $30,000 will going to Uncle Sam, who put the tariff. Tariff is just a word for a tax. It's a word for a tax on an imported good or a service, something that's produced out of the country but brought in here for sale. That's what an import is, and tariff is the name of the tax you put on imports. We have been putting taxes on imports as a nation from the beginning. Although throughout the history, there's nothing new about it. But it's 100%, which means an American would have to buy that truck by giving China 30 grand for the truck, and Uncle Sam another 30 grand, and so with 60 grand, you get the truck. But of course, no one does that. Why? Because Ford and General Motors and Tesla will sell you an electric car or truck for a mere 40 grand or 50 grand or something like that. So who's helped by this? Ford and General Motors, they wouldn't be able to sell their crappy cars otherwise. We would none of us buy a $40,000 or $50,000 electric car if we're going to do that and give BYD 30,000 for a better car rather than 40 or 50,000 to General Motors, however patriotic we might feel. And you know who knows it? Ford and General Motors. So they went to the president and they said, put that tariff there. It'll protect us. Of course, they didn't say our profits, which is the truth. It'll protect jobs. Whenever you hear a capitalist tell you about what they're doing to protect jobs, hold on to your wallet. Someone's reaching. Why is it false? Because this is a terrible act for most American producers. Think of yourself as a maker of shirts or of chairs or of software programs. You would like to buy the trucks you need to bring in your inputs, to sell and distribute your outputs. You're going to have to buy electric trucks. You'd like to buy the best one at the lowest price. Of course, you're competing with enterprises in France and in Germany and in Brazil and in Nigeria and fill in the blank. They're all buying BYD cars at 30 grand. You have to pay 40 or 50 to General Motors. You know what that means? They're going to defeat you economically. You're going to be loser. And when you lose, you're going to lay off your workers because you can't compete with the companies that can buy the biggest, the best, and the cheapest electric vehicle. Now multiply this by dozens of other commodities. China is winning. We are losing. Shh. Don't tell anyone.
Honestly, don't tell anyone. Let's keep losing.
Because you live in a country which is pretending to itself that none of this is going on. It's either never discussed or we turn it around and we say, the Chinese are becoming aggressive in the world. Huh?
The idea, like, what is the evidence? By the way, the evidence of China being aggressive in the world is we want to maintain the status quo with Taiwan, and Chinese fishing boats spraying water at Philippine fishing boats, which, if you only knew the type of behaviors that American commercial fishing vessels have done over the years, you would find that to be absolutely quaint. I can't believe the Chinese fighter jets are following us in the South China Sea. Can you imagine if the Chinese Blue Water Navy was doing their sightseeing off to the coast of Miami or California or in the Gulf of Mexico? Can you imagine if Chinese surveillance planes were flying 10 miles off the coast of fucking San Diego?
They're doing what exactly we did. You know how the United States became a big, powerful country? By doing to Europe what the Chinese are doing to us. It's not new. It's not different. The only question is, why would it be surprising? What a strange behavior is going on here. Now, where is this taking us? And I have a few things, and that's all I really want to tell you. Mr. Trump is a problem. You've probably already noticed that. And one of the ways he's a problem is that he has come this far as a politician. He had a different life before. It's known as a playboy. So he went from a New York playboy to a national politician, maybe even an international politician. And he did it in one basic way. He understood, maybe it's not clear, he understood that America was in such trouble that the mass of people here were remarkably alienated from the conventional Republican and Democratic parties. They didn't feel those parties were doing much for them, which is true. That those parties weren't protecting them from a decline they couldn't quite pinpoint, but they felt, particularly over the last 30 years. Their budgets were squeezed. You might have noticed that 40 years ago, the level of household debt in this country was small. Nowadays, everybody is loaded with debt. I can add, if you're interested, that corporate debt is at a higher level than it's ever been in our country, and government debt.
Debt is how you create money, right? Like, in fractional reserve banking, that's how you expand the money supply. Because all of somebody else's debt is somebody else's deposit. So if I borrow let's say you have $100 in the bank. I, as the bank, have to keep 10% of that as a reserve. So I put $10 in my vault and I take 90% and I loan it to somebody else. And what does that person do? They take that 90%, the $90, they deposit it in my bank. So I take $9, I put that in a vault, I go make an $81 loan to someone else. They deposit that in the bank. And so you see, eventually I have expanded that money supply. That original $100 deposit has, gets done over and over and over again, expanding the total amount of money in the economy each time I do that. I think that's called the M3 money supply.
In other words, we are a country in debt on a scale we didn't imagine 10 years ago, let alone think we would have now. There's a name for companies that have been for several years so deeply in debt that they don't make enough profit, ready, to service their debt. That is, to pay the interest and the portion they have to repay. Now, we have a special name in economics for them. I kid you not, I didn't make this up. Zombie corporations, because they're dead. They're economically defunct. You know how they manage to survive when their profits aren't enough to cover their debts? They take on more debt to pay the debt they couldn't otherwise cover. Uh-oh, that makes them more zombie-ish next year than they were this year, which is what's happening. You might wonder, who lends money to all these indebted people, businesses, and government? Well, let me start with the government, because if you thought the world was crazy before, wait till you get this. The two biggest creditors of the United States government are Japan and China. Japan number one, China number two. A few years ago, it was the other way. China was number one, Japan was number two.
Ooh, Khan Academy.
Let's say for some reason you had lent the government $1,000. And so the government has given you a formally issued piece of paper that says, hey, we, the government, owe you $1,000. This is issued by the Treasury. This could be a Treasury bond. It could be a T-bill of some kind. And let's say that the Federal Reserve, the central bank, is interested in inserting money into our system. So let's say this is the Federal Reserve right over here. Federal Reserve. And so what they do is they create $1,000 of Federal Reserve notes, what we associate as paper money, and they pay it to you, and they buy that Treasury. So that Treasury goes to the Federal Reserve from you, and in exchange, you get this newly created money that the Federal Reserve just created. So there you go. You have, this is $1,000. Now, what would you likely do with that $1,000? Well, it might not be safe to walk around town with your pockets bulging like that, so a lot of folks would deposit it into a bank. So let's think about what would happen to the bank's balance sheet. So you go to Bank A, and I'm not going to think about what was the balance sheet, the pre-existing balance sheet for the bank, but let's just think about what happens to its assets and its liabilities when you make that deposit. A for assets, L for liabilities. If you deposit those $1,000, then your assets for the bank is going to get $1,000
of cash
reserves in reserves,
and $1,000 of
give them the money. They have a liability to you. You should have a checkable deposit account now. So we could say checking account. So now you have a $1,000 checking account, which you would view as an asset for yourself, but it's a liability for the bank. At any time, you could come and ask for that $1,000. $1,000 checking account.
Wow,
account.
accounting.
And this would be for you. Now, we've already spent several videos talking about fractional reserve lending, and there's two ways we can conceptualize it, as we've seen in those videos, but I'm going to go with the simpler version of fractional reserve lending. And so this bank says, look, we are in a world where our reserve requirement, I will do a reserve requirement, and this actually is a typical reserve requirement. The reserve requirement in this country is 10%. Which says that the bank only has to keep 10% of these cash reserves and then it can loan out the rest. And so it does that. That's its business model, a significant part of its business model. And so what it does is, instead of having $1,000 in reserves, it keeps 10%, so it keeps $100, and it loans out the rest. And so it loans out $900. So it's loaning out now $900 to someone else, hopefully someone who is good for the money, who maybe they're going to invest it into their business or they're going to buy a house or whatever else. Now, once again, the bank just didn't give them the money.
That $900 becomes a $900 note, which becomes an asset, right? So against your checking account, they have $100 in reserves and $900 in a note that is returning interest. So let's say that they loan this at 5% or 10% interest, and they give you a 5%, interest on your checking account. So you make 5%, they make 5%. So they've basically taken your money, loaned it, and they sit in between you and the person that's getting the loan, and they take 5% of the interest that is being used on your money. Isn't that a nice little deal? Isn't that a cool deal? You set up a building where people come and give you their money, and then you go loan it out to somebody else, and you just get to sit there as a middleman. No, I can't help you get viewers.
Money.
The only way for you to get viewers is to have talent, and I'm not detecting any.
That person owes the bank money. They owe them $900. So we could say that in exchange for giving them that cash, they're going to have a $900 loan on their balance sheet as an asset. Now, once again, the person that they lent the money to, the loan would be a liability. They owe the money. But for the bank, that's an asset. Hey, someone owes me, the bank, $900. But then what's this person going to do? Well, once again, their pockets are going to
deposit it back in the bank.
They still might not want to walk around town with $900 in their pockets. So they are likely to deposit in a bank. And they could deposit it in Bank A, or they could deposit it in another bank. Let's call it very creatively Bank B. All right. So Bank B, same exercise. I think you might see where this is going. So it's assets, it's liabilities. And so they go and they deposit this $900. So you have $900.
So what's really interesting, do you guys remember Silicon Valley Bank getting bailed out during the Biden administration? You guys remember that? Silicon Valley Bank? Well, what was happening was a lot of tech bros were depositing money in Silicon Valley Bank and then taking loans from Silicon Valley Bank and depositing it into Silicon Valley Bank. And they basically did an infinite money glitch. Silicon Valley Bank would be like, we'll loan you this money as long as you deposit it back in here. And they kept doing that. So Silicon Valley, a lot of tech companies kept, depositing into the bank and loaning. And so they were able to massively expand their balance sheet. Massively, into the billions. Well, then what happened is a lot of people started coming to Silicon Valley Bank and asking to withdraw their money. And it turned out that they didn't have it because they did the maximum, they did maximum risk and maximum monetary expansion within the Silicon Valley Bank. And many of the Silicon Valley companies, they had way more than the $250,000 FDIC insurance that the federal government gives you. They had billions of dollars in their accounts, or hundreds of millions of dollars into their accounts. And if only $250,000 of it was insured, they would have gone bankrupt themselves because, if the bank goes up, belly up, and the accounts are only insured up to $250,000, everything above $250,000 is a loss. And that happens all the time in America. People have more than $250,000 in a bank. Bank goes belly up. They lose that extra money. But because Silicon Valley was so influential in the Biden White House, he came in and he said, we're lifting the FDIC limits and we're going to take federal government money and we're going to bail out Silicon Valley Bank. We're going to make sure that everybody's deposits are good. Even though this company did an incredibly risky procedure of maximizing the growth of their balance sheet. And these were all the biggest libertarian Trump supporters were all 2 years ago were begging at Biden's feet and they got bailed out. And what was the reward for the Democratic Party for bailing out conservative libertarians with your tax dollars? Those billions were poured into the Donald Trump campaign.
Right over there, and the corresponding liability, that person didn't give the money to the bank. The bank that person can demand that money at any point from the bank, and so you have a $900 checking account. And that person would draw upon that checking account to buy the machinery for their business or whatever else. But once again, we have a 10% reserve requirement, which says that the bank only has to keep 10% of that. And so their business model is they do only keep 10% of it, and then the rest of it they loan out. So they loan out $810. It could be a loan or it could be multiple loans altogether. And I think you see where this is going. And so this is lent out to someone else. So now we have $810, which can then be deposited in another bank, Bank C. They can lend out 90% of that, and that process keeps going on and on and on and on. So an interesting question is, given this infusion of $1,000 and given this reserve requirement, how much total money has been created? Well, in other videos, we talk about the multiple measures of the money supply. When the Federal Reserve put this $1,000 of Federal Reserve notes into circulation, they increased the monetary base by $1,000. But one measure of the monetary supply is, well, what are the Federal Reserve notes, the coins, the federal and the paper money that's in circulation, plus the amount of checkable deposits. And we talk about that in other videos as M1. And so our M1 over here, what's it going to be? Well, this person has a $1,000 checking account. $1,000 checking account. They think they have $1,000 that they can write checks against, and they do. And this person has a $900 checking account. $900 checking account. And then this person right over here, then when they deposit their money, they're going to think they have an $810 checking account. They have that. And then that process is going to go.
This is objectively false. No taxpayer funds were used. The FDIC seized SVP and basically gave any value the shareholders had to depositors, which I'm personally fine with. That is objectively not false. The depositors were in on the scam too. And valued shareholders is made up because the value of the bank was zero because it was insolvent. What is the value of an insolvent bank? Zero. Let's go and see what it says. On the morning of March 10th, the California Department of Financial Protection and Innovation seized Silicon Valley Bank and placed it under the receivership of the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation. An additional $100 billion were expected to be withdrawn during Friday. About 89% of the bank's $172 billion in deposit liabilities exceeded the maximum insured by the FDIC. 2 days after the failure, the FDIC received exceptional authority from the Treasury and announced jointly with other agencies that all depositors would have full access to their funds the next morning. The FDIC reopened on Monday, March 13th with a newly organized bridge bank. But rather making uninsured depositors whole from the proceeds of selling the bank's assets without the use of taxpayer money. Except this doesn't make sense. The assets were not worth a sufficient amount to cover the withdrawals. Amish Purnanadam, a corporate economist at the University of Michigan who studied bank values, put it this way: if it looks like a duck, then it's probably a duck. This is absolutely a bailout, plain and simple. Said when a single bank's depositors are fully supported by insurance and bank fees, the cost will eventually be shouldered by customers across the whole U.S. banking system. In the long run, that's a subsidy because we are paying for more than what we had insured. Any deposit support that does not come from the insurance fund or asset auctions will rely on a special assessment on banks. So basically, everybody who has a bank account got taxed. You are wrong. This is 100% a bailout and a creation of money withdrawal. Like, what are you fucking talking about? After Silicon Valley Bank inappropriately funneled its loan recipients to deposit their proceeds into the bank so they could redo it. So they massively expanded their balance sheet. They should not have been insured. They should have lost their money. It's rich people that do. Like, if I did this, if I went and lost $1 million, if I was in some community bank and I had $1 million in my savings account and that bank went belly up, I lose $750,000. It's only because these are connected billionaires that they were able to create a special fucking rule just for them that would tax the entire banking system. The idea that this is not a bailout, you don't understand what bailouts mean. And how did all those deposits get created? Those deposits got created by Silicon Valley Bank making loans.
States is the biggest debtor country in the world by countries. The second biggest creditor of the United States is the biggest debtor is the People's Republic of China. Do you understand? The United States owes China $850 billion, roughly. It has to pay interest, of course, on that debt, like it has to pay on others, which means I'm here to tell you that a portion of the taxes every one of you in this room pays when you buy a bottle of beer or you smoke a cigarette or you pay your taxes, a portion of that money, you should be very pleased, is collected by the United States government, not used for houses or medical care or student loans, but shipped to China as interest on the debt to enable them to build their military capacity to fight the United States. Hello. I didn't make this up. On the other hand, think of it this way. These kinds of loans from Japan, from China, enable the United States government to spend all the money Dr. Leon told us about in Ukraine without having to tax us. Because you know what would bring the war in Ukraine to an end in about 10, maybe 11 seconds? If Americans had to pay for it. But we don't. The Chinese and the Russians, and China, by the way, supports Russia against Ukraine, but lends government money to the United States, which pays for the Ukrainians. Whoa. You think you ought to pay respect to a system working like this? Think. We are in a completely different world than we once were. The empire is declining. We are not strong. We are weak. We don't produce the bulk of the world's output. We don't control the bulk of the world's trade. The US dollar, which in 1950s, 60s, 70s was the global currency dominating all others, isn't anymore. Central banks around the country, which used to hold dollars as backing for their own currencies in their own countries because the dollar was as good as gold, it isn't anymore. So the dollar, from being 70, 80% of the reserves held by central banks, is now about 40%. Still important. We're still in a big industrial power, but nothing like we were. Now, Mr. Trump understood that in this changing world, Americans were being squeezed. And he was right about that. And you should understand that we're still in that situation, and Mr. Trump is president because of it. Here's how it works. Every empire, as it goes down, has the following procedure of handling it. The people at the top, the rich and the powerful, respond to the decline by saying, oh, this is terrible, but not for me. The top always offloads the difficulties and burdens of a decline onto those people less powerful and less rich than themselves. The emperor in Rome didn't suffer the way the average people did. The emperor in Persia or the emperor in Greece, it doesn't matter. All the empires show the same phenomena. Those at the top hold on, work harder than they used to hold on because they know damn well it's going down. And who can't do that are the people who don't have much power and the people who don't have much wealth. And so the working class has to be, one way or another, squeezed as you go down. And we, you, me, we're all being squeezed. And in our naivete, we turn to the Republican and Democratic Party. Protect us. They can't. Oh, they'll tell you whatever you want to hear. You know that. We live in that. But they can't do anything. because the only real thing to do would be to say honestly to the people, "Oh, our empire's going down, it's going to be a hard thing, and maybe we all ought to get together to try to get through this difficulty together." Oh, that would be an interesting idea. Would have a name like, I don't know, socialism. That would be rational. But we don't live
Like, if America had taken the advantage of being the global reserve currency, of being the global hegemon, and instead of spending trillions of dollars on worthless wars in Afghanistan and Iraq, instead of being officious around the world, we had just taken that position and invested in building our own country up and having the highest possible imaginable standard of living with the best quality public services, the best education, the best health care, we would be 50 years ahead of the rest of the world. But instead, we've taken that and we have squandered it. We have all the debt, but we have none of the assets. It's the equivalent of a guy who, instead of investing in, like, I don't know, in his business or in his child's education, goes and spends his entire paycheck on ammunition for his AR-15 and then shoots it all off in a drunken fucking rage. Doesn't even hit a target. Kind of dummy on economics, but if the central bank bails out any financial institution, no questions asked ad infinitum, can the economy avoid a major crash? It would just result in massive inflation. So you would be devaluing, and you would cause asset price inflation. You'd be devaluing savings, which would cause other issues with the confidence in the currency, which would, cause people want to sell that currency to retain a store of value, and that would cause the value of the currency to crash even further, spiraling inflation even further. What's the best way to protect against inflation in a speculative market? Regulate the speculation.
rational.
And raise
How do you
taxes.
squeeze the mass of people? A lot of ways. It's a little bit like that famous poem, how do I lovely, let me count the ways. How am I going to screw the working class? Let me count the ways. So for 40 or 50 years, we make sure that unions can't function. They can't do what they were invented to do, help the workers get a better deal. Not going to get that. We're going to demonize unions. We're going to make every union look like it's, that movie On the Waterfront, a bunch of crooks that are grabbing your dues every week, et cetera, et cetera. You've been living your life in that kind of an environment. It's changed the last few years as working people begin to get it. And they are. That's part of what this meeting is a sign of. Beginning. The Starbucks workers are beginning, and the Amazon workers are beginning. The labor movement is kind of coming back to life. But it's coming late in the process of squeezing the working class. Here's another way you squeeze the working class. You have this thing which you say is some kind of mystery. It's called an inflation. So, what? An inflation sounds like something you do to a balloon. What is an inflation? In economics, it just means prices are going up. But now let's be a little bit more careful. If you know anything about the inflation of the last few years, here's a little statistic. The inflation has gone up faster than average wages and salaries of people. Okay, now I'm going to do this very difficult arithmetic. If the money you have to spend, your wages and salaries, are not going up as fast as the prices, there are going to be things you can't afford anymore. Really special, expensive things.
Like
eggs. Right? What? But will someone honestly tell you that the inflation is a way of squeezing the workers? Not. You look long and hard, you won't get it. The inflation in eggs is due to bird flu. Huh? What? And look, I'm talking to people, I'm not going to be mean, but half of you believe that. And the other half of you think it might be true. Here's what an inflation is. It's a decision made by some people to jack up the price you have to pay for the things they can control the prices of.
That's what this is, basic facts. So like when a bunch of birds die, that doesn't mean that the price to produce an egg has increased. All that means is that supply has been constrained. And so in our economy, the capitalists would say, well, that it's good to raise the prices because that signals that you need to invest a lot of money into egg production. Except that's not what happens, because the egg producer is rational and he understands that the constraint in supply is a shock and it is short term. So he doesn't invest in massively increasing egg production as if the $10 an egg value will be retained. He realizes that within once the short-term supply shock has ended, eggs will return back to a lower price. So he just enjoys higher prices and gets windfall profits. It's a distortion. If anything, it encourages malinvestment. I didn't even know I was still subbed to Mike, but you know what? I'm going to keep it. Thank you, Hack the Rich.
Who sets prices in a capitalist economy? Answer: the employer. Those of you who have had jobs all your life as workers, do you ever recall being called into an office to add your opinion as to what the price should be of what you helped to produce? Never happened. The United States Census tells us 3% of Americans are employers. Welcome to the other 97%. That's you and me. The employers set the prices. We pay them. When they jack up the price, that's because they want to give us fewer of whatever it is they make for the money we have to give them. It's a way of screwing the working class. And that's how it's been used in the last few years. And all these economics professors, including many of mine and people I know, sit around debating, how are we going to control the inflation? What is it? And how does it happen? I sit there, I'm one of their students, and I want to run up there and hit them over the head with a ping pong paddle. What are you doing? What is this noise coming out of your mouth? And then their decision, which really, at this point, I hope I'm getting to you. You're getting upset.
Apparently, Donald Trump just got off the phone. Holy shit! Okay, chat. Wow, we are 4 hours into the stream. If you enjoy the content, please consider supporting it by subscribing right now at tier 1, tier 2, or tier 3 sub. If you have Amazon Prime, you can attach that to your Twitch account. You get 1 free sub a month. That's your Twitch Prime sub. Let's fucking go. Hell yeah. All right, where are we at with sub count right now? We are currently at 7140 sub points. Wah, 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 wah. Wah. We dropped. Hate to see it, chat. Hate to see it, chat. We hate to see it. We've lost some subs. We're on the way down. And why is that? Well, because there was bonus subs at the end of last month. So people went a little bit wild. VO rises. Stop giving a shit. Holy crap. You stopped giving a shit, and my Prime is being used for Hassan. He's rich. Hashtag support small streamers like me. I'm just a little small bean. I'm a little small streamer. Look how small of a streamer I am. I'm a small, tiny little streamer. I'm a tiny little streamer. I'm only 261 English channel. I only have 0.6% of just chatting viewers in the world. I only have 0.25% of all English viewers in the world. That means, I mean, that's tiny. I'm a tiny little guy. Keep supporting your small little streamer, Mike from PA. We're getting, oh man, we're close. I really want to get to 100K followers. Because I don't have enough followers, chat. I'm underfollowed. And it kind of sucks. It's very annoying. It's hard to get followers. I know I have a better emotes, but Mike needs it. Please keep going. Thank you. Thank you, Vio, for recognizing I'm a small streamer. Wait, what is this pin?
Students.
Oh, this. Okay, the thing we were watching, you pin. I was like, what is the pin? Did you pin my share link? Or did you pin the wrong link? You pinned the wrong link, didn't you?
The decision is we're going to deal with it by raising interest rates.
Anyway, thank you for supporting the stream, chat. I really do appreciate it. Chat, did you know that Vio has broken the Ayaya record? Vio has been listening to Ayaya on loop for 32 days in a row. Can you guys stop? Can you stop that now? Why does it matter with the link? Oh, it doesn't matter, really. Man eating orange, thank you for the 10. Let's go. Did I thank everybody who gave big bombs? I don't want to miss the big gifters. Chuck D's with the 50 bomb. Dans de Bedeau, thank you for the 5. Stevie G, thank you for the 50. Weasley Little Liar, thank you for the 5. You guys are the best. Thank you for supporting the stream. It really does mean a lot.
Oh, wow. This
Several horses, thank you for the 5.
is wonderful. Who gets screwed when you...
Oh, what was I saying? Oh, yeah. Donald Trump just got off the phone with the Prime Minister of Greenland, and apparently they think he's going to invade. Many European officials had hoped for his comments about seeking control of Greenland for national security reasons were a negotiating ploy to gain more influence over the NATO territory. Russia and China are both also jostling for position in the Arctic. But the call with Fredrickson has crushed such hopes, deepening the foreign policy crisis between the NATO allies. The intent was very clear. They want it. The Danes are now in crisis mode, said one person briefed on the call. Another said, the Danes are utterly freaked out by this. Europeans, like, one of my favorite things about Europeans is how delusional they are about how cucked they are. Like, Europeans think that their countries are like little, like, we are a proud country and we have our own opinions, and Americans, ha 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 ha. They have like this like superiority over Americans, when it's like every single country in Europe is a fake country. The only exceptions to that is like Switzerland and maybe Austria. The rest of you are all fucking cucks. I can't believe Finland and Sweden entered NATO. You pathetic fucking losers, man. So if Trump says, you know what? I really like Northern Ireland. I'm gonna take it. I'm gonna give it to Ireland because I want to. and there's absolutely nothing the Brits can do about it. They would have to. I just don't like it's MapGore. Have you heard of this thing? It's called MapGore. It's when you have part of a piece of land, it's the wrong color. I hate that. It's MapGore. We're gonna give Northern Ireland back to Ireland. You could do that. Honestly, if we're being honest, Canada is kind of MapGore too. We've got to paint it. We've got to paint it red, white, and blue. What do you say, folks? I've been playing a lot of this game called Victoria 3. It's when I was able to make America great again. We had 100 states. If you think about it, 100 states sounds a hell of a lot better than 50. We're so lucky nobody gave Trump Victoria 3. Like, we're so lucky that Trump doesn't know about Paradox Games. Like, we are legitimately lucky. I was playing Victoria 3, and did you know communism is overpowered? You can really raise the power of your country and your economy through worker co-ops, because you get a more equitable distribution of wealth, which means the quality of life of your workers is higher, which attracts more immigration, which means you have more pops. It's amazing. It's really overpowered. And then your economy is so big, you could just bully everybody. You could take all their shit. Socialism will win. Wait, what game? Victoria 3.
You raise an interest rate. In case you're not rich yourself, I'm going to tell you, it's not rich people. They don't give a
When
flying.
Victoria 3 first came out, I haven't played it since this period, so I don't know. Victoria 3 players think communism is too OP. Apparently, giving workers more disposable income is a winning strategy, and Paradox's economic simulation game. Victoria's see, the reason why communism was overpowered in early Victoria 3 is the capitalist class didn't act like they would in reality, which means like you could go communist and other countries wouldn't be like, oh my God, communism. They were just like, oh, cool, you're communist. Do you want to keep trading? And so communist states were able to like vastly increase their standard of living and their productivity because workers were just more compensated, because capitalists are useless, by the way. And so you would outdevelop, you would outproduce, you would be, really attractive for immigration. The more left wing you are, if you became multicultural and there was no discrimination, then immigrants would come to your country and they would just be instantaneously valuable workers, and they were happy because they were accepted in society, So global communism was like, oh, mega OP. So I think they have started to change it because they've like realized that, where if you go communist, like all non-communist countries like hate you and want to like declare war on you and shit. So it's like way more risky, which is much more realistic.
Well, whether the interest rate is...
It's been a couple of years. You've missed a lot of updates. Oh, what's new now? It's nerfed now because you have to manually build all the factories, so it's 10 times more annoying. It's pretty easy to get cooed if you go commie now. Oh, no.
6%. Well, they're rich. That's what it means to be rich. You don't care. But you have to care, because it's going to mean that little bit of money at the end of the month that you have to pay on your credit card is going to be bigger than it was before. And everything works like that. The rich don't care. You know what that's like? It's like, I'm going to stick it to you now for a moment, congestion pricing. Oh, good. We have a problem in New York with traffic. This should come as hot news. It's only been true for a century. And we're going to finally do something. Oh, really? Yeah, what? We're going to tax everybody the same. What? The same. A rich person who will not give a damn, and the poor person for whom this adds up as an extra buck or two every time you do something, if you have to come in and out of Manhattan, etc., etc. Only an American politician who's just seen what inflation has done to people would come up with that solution. And by the way, raising interest rates, because I can see it perked some of your interest, is that the only way to deal with an inflation? Of course not. Why did you ever think it? Answer, because that's what you were fed all the time in all the media. The last time the United States had an inflation as bad as the one a couple of years ago, right, was back in the late 70s and 80s. We had funded the war in Vietnam by printing a lot of money, because otherwise the people would have revolted against it. If you'd said to everybody, we're having a war in Vietnam, it's going to cost every family a couple of thou a year. Whip, end of war. So we borrowed. We printed money and we borrowed. And then we had the terrible inflation. And then a conservative Republican president, Richard Nixon, went on the television August 15th, 1971, and said, I'm going to do something about this terrible inflation. Oh, good. There was tremendous suffering in the country and a lot of pressure. And put that together with the problems with the war, he had to do something. So he declared a wage price freeze that day, 15th of August. As of tomorrow morning, he said, this conservative Republican president who became president by becoming the champion of anti-communism. As of tomorrow morning, he said, any business that raises its prices, we will come for you, we will arrest you, and you go to jail. Guess what? The next morning, inflation vanished. Amazing. Are you surprised? Shouldn't be. Is this a story about how you control an inflation? Yeah. Did it work? Yeah. Did it happen in the United States? Yeah. Do you know about it? No. No. And the people at the Federal Reserve who decide interest rates, they made sure not to ask about it, not to talk about it, not to debate it. Let me give you another example, because I think that perked some of your interest. In the early 1940s, the United States decided to enter and fight World War II. And the economists, who, by the way, included a significant number of Marxists and socialists, because in the 1940s, they would be hired by President Roosevelt at the time because they were considered the most reliable anti-Nazis, anti-fascists. So people like Galbraith, whose name you may know, Paul Sweezy, Harry Magdoff, very important people on the left of American economics, were working in Washington. And they went to Roosevelt and they said, okay, you got a problem. You're about to fight a war. You're going to move all these resources, factories, railroads, to work on a war, to supply the army, supply the navy, and fight a war. And those resources are therefore not going to be available to produce food, clothing, shelter, consumer goods. So we're going to have a shortage of consumer goods since we're using these resources, a large number of them, to fight a war. And here's the problem with that, President. If there's a shortage of goods for the mass of people who presumably will still want to buy underpants and shoes and coasters and all the other things of life, with a shortage, we got a problem. And the president said, well, what's our problem? He said, the market system. The president was confused. I said, I thought we were supposed to be for that. Yeah, but we can't afford it in a war. Why not? They had to explain to him, just like I'm doing now with you. If there's a sudden shortage, then there won't be enough toasters or ice cream cones or fill in the blank. And you know what happens in a market economy when there's scarcity of goods? The people with the money offer more. You'll come with your $1 to the ice cream vendor in the park, and you got your 2 little kids with you, and you want to buy them an ice cream cone, and you hand him $2 for the 2 cones, and he looks at you and says, I only got 4 cones left. And before you can respond, the person next to you, who you can tell by his outfit is much better heeled than you are, says, I'll offer you $5 for each cone. Guess who gets the cones? If you have a shortage, a market system is a system that allocates whatever is scarce to the people with the most money.
Yeah, exactly. I think this is something that people really underestimate, is like shortages are oftentimes not situations where demand has increased. Shortages come from a position when supply is disrupted by some outside shock. And what ends up happening is just what amounts to price gouging.
Those of you who think of yourself as moral or ethical ought to think about why you support a market system that does what I just said. Really? That's what you want? You want to live in an economy that distributes whatever is scarce to people with the most money? You know what that means? It means that the little bit of milk will be purchased at a high price by the nice rich couple who gives it to their cat. But it will not be affordable to the poor couple who needs it for their children. That's how the market works, Jack. You're supposed to love the market. You're supposed to believe it's efficient. It never was. That kind of argument is what we in academia call bullshit. But it works. Mr. Trump has become president because he knew that the mass of the American people were being squeezed and that the conventional Republicans and Democrats weren't doing squat about it. And he said, I'm different. Watch me. I'm going to call all Mexicans rapists. I'm going to be outrageous. I'm going to say the things that were quoted earlier. I'm going to be a misogynist, not quietly and under the table, the way it's usually done, but big and loud and open, all about it. Watch me. I'll say all those racist and other things that other politicians believe, but have learned, don't say that, or at least don't say it in public. And he convinced Americans, a lot of them, not all, but a lot of them, he's different. And when you got two parties that aren't doing anything for you, and you're feeling very squeezed, you give your vote to somebody different. After all, why not? The Democrats had the equivalent. You all know his name. Bernie. He was the different on the other end. The politician who, for the first time in half a century, didn't run away from the name socialist. Had he run, he would have picked up that same different. Maybe let's go with him. But the Democrats shut down their only chance. And look at them. They suffered the results. Mr. Trump, there's no reason for any of us to imagine he's going to change. He's going to be Mr. Different. That's what he does. And you can already see it. You can see it in what he did to Mr. Netanyahu. Bye-bye. Bye-bye, Mr. Netanyahu. Your life is probably over, your career almost certainly. For those of you who don't understand it, it's again American craziness. The Israelis made a decision to hitch their wagon with the United States. They made that decision many years ago. Fateful decision. Good in the short run, a disaster in the long run.
And that's pretty much America in politics in a nutshell, right? Which is good in the short term, disastrous in the long run. Is there any policy that America pursues that if you were to look at the long-term health of a country, you would do? I mean, our taxes aren't even particularly low. They're pretty much like average tax rate for a rich country. It's not even a low tax rate. So we have mid to high taxes. We have piss poor social services. We underinvested education. We underinvested infrastructure. The money that we do invest is grifted because it goes to like connected, corrupt individuals. Like, our quality of our housing stock is declining because we produce less housing now than we do every year than we did in the 70s, even though our population is up like 70%. Like, this country is shit. It's actually dysfunctional in every way. In what way is this country functional? Can you tell me one area where you're like, America, they are good at this? Just one area. Military, we lose wars constantly. We're the war losers. Our military production is shit. China could produce 220 times more ships than we can. We can't even make ships. Our jalapeno poppers have fucking poisonous, cancerous chemicals in them. We're not even good at that. They just banned a chemical that VO bought in December. This is how insane our country is. They finally banned a chemical that VO bought in December, and I was like, no, you should. Oh no, you bought the poison chemical. And she's like, what? And I'm like, yeah, you got us poison. And then they banned it. And it's like, but it's in all your candy that you grew up eating. It was in there the whole time. If you like nerds, do you like nerds? You were eating that shit. Red dye number 3. FDA finally bans cancer-causing food dye. This was like 9 days ago. The U.S. Food and Drug Administration is finally banning the food dye Red 3 from use in foods, beverages, oral drugs, dietary supplements, addressing a decades-long regulatory failure. Red 3 has been banned from the use of topical drugs and cosmetics since 1990, but the FDA itself determined that the dye causes cancer when eaten by animals. Because the FDA failed to uphold its legal obligation to fully ban cancer-causing additives, Red 3 remained permitted in food, supplements, and oral drugs more than 34 years later. That changed on January 16th, 2025, thanks to a color additive petition filed by CSPI in 2022. This is what you need to know about the harmful additive, including where you might find it, why the FDA's long-delayed ban is a win for public health. They just banned this shit. Animal studies completed in the 1980s revealed that Red 3 causes thyroid cancer in rats. When studies reveal that an additive causes cancer in animals or humans, the Delaney Clause, a provision of the Federal Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act, obligates the FDA to deem it unsafe and prohibit it from use in food, drugs, and as cosmetics. The FDA relied on the Delaney Clause to ban Red 3 from topical products in the U.S. in 1990 and did so again in banning the dye from food products. It only took 36 fucking years, but hey, we got it. Companies still are using it. All right, I'll be right back, chat.
And that disaster has now come full circle. They're identified in the whole world as a complicit partner in what was done in Gaza. The Israelis went into Gaza to defeat and destroy Hamas. Didn't work. To defeat or eject the Palestinian people. Didn't work. And all that happened 2 days ago was a decision by the United States upon which it depends to cut its relationship with a losing proposition. It's ugly all around. It will not save the United States from being identified as complicit with all that happened there. And the books and articles and documentaries about it will be with us for the next generation. And Hamas, it will inherit the rage and the fury of 2.5 million residents of Gaza who have watched their mother, their father, their children. The young people that are coming are going to be a much greater danger to Israel than the old Hamas ever was. This is a disaster. And most of the world sees it. That's why the votes in the UN are lopsided. 150 countries on the side of the Palestinians, 25 abstentions of the United States, Israel, and the Canary Islands. I mean, it's just silly. It's a silly spectacle. But that's another sign of a country going down. Last example, Ukraine. The problems in Ukraine begin with the dissolution of the Soviet Union back in 1989, 1990. Ukraine, a major part of what used to be the Soviet Union, particularly important in grain growing, very, very rich soil, so forth. A lot of finagling of the countries of the West, NATO moving eastward, threatening Russia, and all that. I won't bore you with the rehistory. And then to stop what was happening after NATO took over in Poland, in Czechoslovakia, and all the rest, Mr. Putin and the Russians said, no, not Ukraine, not the eastern part of Ukraine, which is majority Russian and Russian-speaking, Russian language, Russian culture, and so on. And the United States says, oh, good, you invaded. That's a bad thing. We can mobilize the whole world around the bad thing of a big country invading a little country. That sounds good. That was already a mistake, because what was Afghanistan? A big country invading a little poor country. What was Vietnam? A big country invading a... The position of the United States as going to war around the principle of a big country shouldn't invade a little country sounds a little hollow coming from the United States, except, of course, here, where the denial is the governing spirit of the country. Just like we're going to be denying on Monday the Martin Luther King Association, while we talk endlessly about the Donald Trump Association. So the war. And the United States decides to go in and round up the usual Europeans to go with you. Okay, how do you fight the war? And this goes to something said before, and I want to conclude with. The United States is caught in the decline, discovering that the decline trumps everything else. And I don't mean to be clever by using the word trumps. The nuclear weapons of the United States are useless. The enormity of them, useless. Why? Because if you dared use them in Ukraine, the other side has them too, and will use them, and have made that quite clear. So you can't, because it's self-destructive. So that's out. Well, what do you have? Conventional warfare. But then you got another problem. The Russians are better equipped for that than you are. The Russians also have a history, in case you're not familiar with it. Napoleon thought he could defeat Russia. He couldn't. Hitler thought he could defeat Russia. He couldn't. Invading Russia has turned out to be, or fighting Russia, a really bad idea. But the United States, used to fighting such powerhouses as the poorest countries on earth, Vietnam, Afghanistan, didn't make the adjustment. So it can't fight. It realized that within months.
Do you think Trump is going to give the Saudis nukes? I think that Trump would not give the Saudis nukes, and Biden would be more likely to do that. However, I think it's possible because he's so corrupt they could bribe him. But I think giving Saudi Arabia nukes is the most, as far as like foreign policy decision, it is the most evil possible idea that you could come up with. If you were like, what is something that you could do that is plausible within our system, that is the worst possible decision? I think giving nuclear technology to Saudi Arabia is number one. Like, I think it's actually even worse than what Biden did with supporting the genocide in Gaza, because Saudi Arabia is basically a rogue terrorist state, and the moment they start producing nuclear devices is the moment that nuclear devices will start being used in terrorism. I could imagine a nuclear bomb going off in any number of capitals or large cities if that happens within 10 years. I think genocide, global thermonuclear war would be significantly more plausible if Saudi Arabia was giving like, this is how bad. I'm not saying the genocide in Gaza isn't a world historic crime. I'm saying giving nukes to Saudi Arabia is on the level of a genocide. It's that stupid. I'm not trying to downplay Gaza. I'm trying to get you to understand just how bad giving nukes to Saudi Arabia would be as an idea. It's like handing a loaded gun to a 3-year-old with a hair trigger and the hammer cocked. And then this would also force Iran to accelerate their program as well, thereby, incentivizing Iran to get nukes. And then Turkey would be like, well, we need to get nukes. Giving Saudi Arabia nukes would accelerate a global arms race. There would be a bunch of unstable states containing more nuclear weapons. Proliferation. It's so batshit crazy that I don't even know what to say.
So it came up with the great plan, the genius of
Israel and Turkey already has nukes. Turkey doesn't have nukes. They have American nukes within their border, but they don't have nukes.
Mr. Blinken or Jake Sullivan.
If you follow the Hassanabi doctrine, everyone should have nukes? No. No. Nobody should have nukes.
Or other people who I hope whose names mean nothing to you, because they sure mean nothing historically. Here's what their great strategy was: a war of sanctions. Oh, we will get the Russians. We will, I'm now quoting President Biden, reduce the ruble to rubble. Somebody with poetic genius gave him that one. The ruble will become rubble, and Russia will fall to its knees. Wonderful images right up there with Mickey and other mouses in the American consciousness. And they did. They stopped. The Europeans, if you know the story, stopped buying oil and gas from Russia, which is a major export of the Russian economy. And that would cripple Russia. It was the idea. Problem. Russia is part of the BRICS. And the Russians went to the Chinese and the Indians and said,
the Indians are not reliable partners. And that's the thing with BRICS, is it's like the Indians are not reliable partners, right? They have like imperialist ambition with third world development. Like, that's what's really crazy about India. India is like probably one of the worst governed countries in the world and has some of the most virulent nationalists in the world. It's like crazy. Like, nationalism where you're delusional is like the most like off-putting nationalism. Like, the Chinese nationalism has risen commensurate with their ascension in the world. It is a problem without a doubt. but it's not a expansive, revanchist, toxic nationalism like the Indian net forms of nationalism are just genocidally extreme. Like it's bad. It's really bad. I don't know about that. To my point, despite local protests, India is building a giant hydro dam on the Singang River to counter a Chinese dam, the world's largest upstream in Tibet. Millions of people could be hurt. New Delhi and Beijing's geostrategic contest for water towards a Himalayan water war. Al Jazeera, please.
Don't buy our oil and gas. We need to sell the oil and gas. How about you buy our oil and gas? Done, said Mr. Modi. Done, said Xi Jinping. And thereby the American strategy went, along with everything else, into the toilet. Didn't work. Total fail. Russian rubles, fine. Russian economy, in case you don't know, has grown faster over the last 2 years than the American economy has, which should surprise no one. Because remember how we as a nation got out of difficult economic times known as the Great Depression? We went to war in World War II. We took half our unemployed people and put them in uniform, and we took the other half of the unemployed and gave them jobs, making them a uniform. And that's how we that's how we did it. Turns out war can help solve economic problems. We should have known because that's what we did, but we couldn't imagine it. These failures of imagination, these are the signs of economic, powerful decline. So if you really want to understand where we are, it doesn't depend on anything Mr. Trump does. That's the important thing to understand. Don't get caught up in that. Mr. Biden's influence on the economic conditions of our society are marginal. Mr. Trump's in his first presidency were marginal. Most of the things he boasted about, he couldn't do. He built a wall, along the Mexican border. More Mexicans came, not fewer. That was 100% bust, right? Now he's proposing, as you probably know, and I heard as I was coming over here today, that ICE is going to be raiding cities across America and throwing people into Mexico. Yeah, he may do some of that. Maybe he'll do a lot of it. Who knows? He doesn't know. He talks however he feels, moment to moment, like certain jerks we all know, right? So what difference does it make? If he actually does it,
apparently the CBS is making a show called FBI CIA. Is there such a thing as negative ratings? Like, you know what I mean? Like when this show comes on, it results in like less people watching. Like you know what I mean? Like this show is so far below replacement rate show. Where like it's like, ugh! I mean, I guess boomers would like it, right?
The role of symbolism without going through constant moments of self-examination. And I must.
He actually takes the 10 to 15 undocumented immigrants in the United States and puts them into Mexico. We're going to have meetings like this, only it's going to be about Mexico. Mexico lives off the remittances, the money earned by Mexican people here that they're sending back to their mother, their father, their children, back home. And that flow of money is an absolute blessing to Mexico. It doesn't have to sell anything. It doesn't have to export anything. It just gets the money shipped by its expatriates here. Imagine that suddenly gets stopped because they're not here anymore. They lost their job and they were deported back to Mexico. But it gets worse. They're arriving in Mexico at a time when Mr. Trump is threatening them or hitting them with tariffs, which is killing the market Mexico had in the United States, its biggest buyer of its output. including many automobiles made by Ford and General Motors in Mexico for export here. Those goods are not going to be able to come in here without a tariff, which means we're not going to be buying them, which means the Mexicans are going to be laying people off. When the money from remittances isn't coming and the millions are coming looking for the work that will not be there. You know what that's going to make out of Mexico? A disaster that's going to remind everyone else of the sad country of Haiti. A disaster of gangs and American tourism there. Bye-bye. That's the kind of chaos that's coming out of the denial. The war in Ukraine is lost because the Russians can fight forever. And for those of you who pay attention, you may have noticed, you should have, that the Russian army is many, many miles into Ukraine. It's very clear who's winning and very clear who's losing, except here. So my parting final words.
Well, see, the Ukrainians, they don't want to push the Russians out. You know, they don't mind. They don't mind giving up Donetsk, Luhansk. They don't mind giving up, you know, the Sea of Azov. They don't mind giving up Crimea. What are you talking about? They don't want it. They're, you know, it's fine.
About to happen is not about Mr. Trump or what he does or doesn't do.
How do I explain to a Ukrainian, not particularly right-wing, that negotiation with Russia, maybe even losing some territory, might be a better decision than the endless grind of life by being a proxy of the U.S.? Is that Ukrainian in Ukraine? Describe the Ukrainian you're talking to. Are they a American or European national who identifies as ethnically Ukrainian but is not fighting in Ukraine? Because, like, if you're if you're an American saying we should fight forever and I'm Ukrainian, well, I mean, they are trying to recruit soldiers. Like, you can return and fight. If you're not, like, if they are in Ukraine and they're fighting, then I have absolutely no quarrel with that person. That is totally legitimate. If they're a Westerner trying to, like, say we should fight, other people should die for what I believe in, well, then that's chauvinism. Recent refugee from this war, Portugal. Husband and son are soldiers, not sure. Okay, so they're the spouse of soldiers. I don't think you can change those people's. I mean, they've paid the ultimate price, right? Like, they're putting their money where their mouth is. There's really nothing to debate. Like, if they believe that they should fight, then that's a reasonable position for them to have. That being said, you know, I've seen polling that the majority of Ukrainians want to have a negotiated settlement. Like, you know, I'm not going to tell somebody who's fighting for their country that they're wrong. Like, the reality is that Ukraine has been invaded by Russia. You know, that's my opinion. Thankfully, Scheinbaum recently said the government will have more influence on the economy by just doing basic regulation. She wants more government planning. Yeah, I know. She's great.
His capacity for saying one thing and doing another is already legendary. You don't need me to remind you of it. But whatever he in fact does is marginal. Most of what is going to happen to you and me is going to depend on two things. One, what the rest of the world does as it watches and navigates the decline of the American empire. So it's actually more important what Xi Jinping and Mr. Modi and Lula in Brazil and so forth and so on. And that remarkable woman who's now the head of Mexico, who has her work cut out for her. She has a very famous Hispanic name. Scheinbaum is her name. But she's the one to watch, because what she does, faced with what I've just described to you, that's going to be powerful, whatever it is. So it's the outside that's going to affect us more than our own political leaders, because we don't have the power and they don't anymore. Plus, we are so lost in denial that we don't know what we're doing. That's why we miscalculated in Ukraine. That's why they're out of touch, not just with the American people, but with the world reality. Watch them. This morning, I read a story in a major American financial newspaper about the International Monetary Fund saying that the United States would grow 2.7% in the year 2024. and thereby lead the world economy. I couldn't believe it. It's so gross. By the way, the number's correct. 2.7% is what the IMF has now said. But that's not leading the world economy. That's lousy. Chinese growth this year will be 5%, and the Indian growth will be 7%. The United States isn't leading anything except here in its own weird mentality. And what's the other thing?
It's leading the world in nominal military spending, so I guess that, and you know, it's the fastest decline for life expectancy of any developed country, or fastest decline of reproductive rate by native-born citizens. Like America is collapsing in every way that you can measure. Ukrainians, quite frankly, Ukrainian is basically a dialect of Russian. It's a mutually intelligible dialect. It's more of a political statement to call it Ukrainian as like a separate language. You know, it's kind of like the difference between Austrian German and German in, you know, fucking northern Berlin. And ironically, like the you know, High German, as we call it, really does come from like Bavarian Austrian and is more imposed upon the northern Germans, funnily enough. High German really doesn't mean like, it means high as in mountainous, German from the mountains. You know, like the Ukrainian identity is one that is kind of and all national identities. I want you to understand, I'm not calling Ukrainian any less legitimate than French, but these are constructed identities and they're political identities. And there's a lot of connections between them. It's sort of like, I'll give you an analogy that makes sense. A French-speaking Swiss. Are they Swiss or are they French? Or an Italian-speaking Swiss. Are they Italian or are they Swiss? These are identities that shift. Lines on the map that have shifted and are currently the place they are. But does that mean it's like indelible in some sort of like cosmic way? No, it's inherently contingent. It's inherently conditional. It's inherently social and related to world systems. And you know, I don't think people should like write these lines on a map in blood and then pretend like they are connected back into some sort of primordial ooze. I'm picking this question of another chatter, but why do we say for Ukraine to negotiate and integrate and maybe lose territory to Russia, but we support the right of Palestinians? Palestinians have lost 88% of their land. I'm sorry, they've already lost 78% of their land. The Palestinians have already given up 78% of their land. And they are treated as second-class citizens or non-citizens in that territory. They don't have any self-determination. The Palestinians would beg and plead to be in the same condition that Ukrainians are in. It's ridiculous to compare the two. The Palestinians are far, far, far more oppressed and worse off and less supported. And as far as I know, people of Ukrainian nationality in Russia are not treated as second-class citizens any more than any other person in Russia is treated. So I don't think the analogy really fits. Also, the situation with Ukraine is a lot different than the situation with Palestine. Like, they're not really very analogous at all, to be honest. Like, for example, the territory of Ukraine was a administrative region under the Soviet Union. And when the Soviet Union was unlawfully dissolved, the territory of the Ukrainian SSR was integrated into a new state. there wasn't a actual kind of attempt to negotiate a territorial split. It was just imposed on all the parties. So it's a different situation. And in Gaza, the Palestinians, which were part of they were already subdivided and subdivided and subdivided from the fall of the Ottoman Empire, right? So it's a totally different situation. Israel wants to ethnically cleanse Palestinian. Russia wants to conquer and annex Ukraine. It's not at all similar when you take into account the citizens' process. I mean, I think they're pretty similar in the sense that they're both unlawful military aggression, but I do think the Israeli intent is genocidal, where I think the Russian intent is not necessarily genocidal. It is more revanchist. Which is not to say that it's good. It's just to say that they're different types of crimes.
The second thing, beside the outside dominating the inside, it's you. And that has been said by both of my fellow speakers. We are the unknown. Will the American people allow themselves to be the ones who get screwed as this empire passes? It's the same question that the British working class had to face when the British Empire collapsed over the last century. We, whether women building up or formerly incarcerated people, will they get together? Will they make movements? Will they make demands? Will they make coalitions with one another to realize those demands? That's the wild card everywhere. By the way, there are think tanks all over America that are asking the same question. They're worried. Is the labor movement waking up in a way that could change all of this? People were being worked at unbelievable stress in Amazon warehouse for years.
Oh my God! I have such good timing with my AI coverage. DeepSeek is a CCP state psyop and economic warfare to make American AI unprofitable. They are faking the cost was low to justify setting price low and hoping everyone switches to damage AI competitiveness in the U.S. Don't take the bait. They're freaking out, dude. They're freaking out.
Or in Starbucks coffee shops for years. But in the last 2 or 3 years, enough is enough, no more. We're gonna. That remarkable group, Chris Smalls and the folks out there in Staten Island, that's a remarkable and has had effects everywhere else. The Boeing workers on the West Coast rejected 3 contracts before they accepted the one that they found, which was better than the ones that they had rejected. The labor movement, that's the question. That's why this meeting, and that's why this building, and that's why these efforts, and that's why the speakers are really very, very important. If this gives you a swell head, that's my point. It is more in your hands than you think of, because in addition to saving yourselves, if it's a time of decline, if the people who run this society are so busy denying it, refusing to face it, as I've tried to show you, then we are stronger.
Too late. I'm doing integrating in a big tech company, and we are now looking at DeepSeek over the U.S. models. Cope harder, Westoids. I mean, honestly, if I were you, Mr. Mandela Effect, I would write a memo about how much more cost effective it would be, and do like cost estimates of comparing like using DeepSeek versus other like American AIs. And then I would like file that memo where you are like, cost savings if my my recommendations are made will be blah, million. And then if they use DeepSeek, you should ask for a bonus. Be like 10% of these cost savings should be a bonus. Because of my foresight, I deserve this. And then you should take 10% of your 10% and give that as a bonus to me. I think that's fair.
Than we might suspect, and they are weaker than they might feel confident.
Okay,
about.
deal.
And that's a
Let's go.
good time for us to act. The conditions are pretty good, not terrible, as some of my fellow leftists are worrying about. Of course, we have problems and difficulty. I'm not pretending otherwise. But we also have an historical moment. I was having a conversation with one of you in the audience just before I made my speech, and she pointed out quite rightly that the old Cold War mentality, that everything to the left is evil, bad, won't work, is dead. That generation died and took it with him. Young people today don't have that mentality.
The U.S. finance capital will just force the Treasury to say AI is overproducing. China is overproducing AI. Chuck D's with the 50 bob. What the fuck? Let's go. Chucky boy. Let's go.
They're much more open to what it
Somebody
is.
posted my my clip. Oh, guys, check this out. I want to show you this. Somebody posted my clip of somebody giving $10,000 to Pixie's fundraiser and me celebrating it to live stream fail. And Destiny's community brigaded it. And tried to be like, what's your proof that it was Mike's community? Look how many downvotes this got. 55% upvoted. 55% upvoted. The brigading. Is there anything actually showing it was a Mike from PA viewer, or was he literally just taking credit with no proof? Stolen Valor, Mike from PA way. I'm curious. I wonder if this guy posts anywhere. Destiny. He seems to be in a lot of Destiny. Don't piss away so much potential because you're a freak in the bedroom. You're too old for this shit. Destiny viewer caught. All right, let's go ahead and see this. Is Fat Penguin a Destiny viewer? He might not because he asked a new. Oh, never mind. Destiny viewer caught. Last post. Every single one of them. To my understanding, there is nothing linking this to his community. I think he put the word out and it came through at the same time, so he was taking credit. So did they all form this like talking point in Destiny subreddits? Okay, so this guy might just be dumb. I had 7,000 viewers and I'm the only one who was talking about it. It was fucking me. Like, give me a fucking break, man. Let's see who's getting. I think you're confusing the title of this clip with what's happening clip. He's not taking credit. He's just pointing out someone donated. Now, the one that posted the clip is assuming it was a chatter. And that's speculation, as you point out, but we don't know for sure. Mike also assumed it was his chatter. Oh, my Lord. From what I know, Mike's stream has always been largely sponsored by a few huge Oilers that drop thousands of gifted subs. I have like 4,000 individual subscribers. Like 4,000 individuals have paid for their own sub. There are people that do give me decent gift subs relatively frequently. But nobody, no single individual gives me thousands of subs in a month. That's just crazy talk. I think my top sub gifter, I've been streaming for 6 years, is like 5,000 subs gifted. This is just complete delusion. All I'm saying, if he had whalers like that, there would be no reason for him to be a Hassan waiting room. What the fuck are you talking about, man? What are these Destiny people? What is this? Every single person in here is a Destiny viewer. Why are these Destiny viewers all brigading my post? Why are Destiny viewers and Destiny supporters allowed to brigade posts? Could live stream fail explain to me why every single one of the commenters on this positive post is a Destiny viewer who is sweeping for the fucking sex crimes? Like, every single one of these posters is a Destiny viewer. Is it really possible to smear or bad faith when it comes to Mike from fucking PA of all people? He might be the worst lol cows on the internet. Let's see, chat. What do you think? What do you think? Let's see. I mean, it's possible this guy isn't a huge Destiny dick rider. "14 days ago, Destiny dick riding. Dick riding and live stream fails. Dick riding not so erudite. Every single one of these people is a fucking Destiny viewer. Could they get a ban on Destiny viewers from live stream fails for a while? Basically every clip of him to ever exists. The left-wing equivalent of Nick Fuentes. Look at these fucking weirdos. The Taliban. Every single one of the guys posting it. This is just, so this is what live stream fails is now. Live streams fails is the Destiny brigade shit. It doesn't matter how many crimes this motherfucker's committed. This is what it is. Every single one is a Destiny brigader. I mean, at a certain point, like, it's very obvious that this was a brigaded post. These people are not spontaneously showing up. Did Mike? So they just allow people to make. I was never married. I've never had a, like. What is this? I mean, is there not an LSF rule against brigading? Allegations and speculations? That's not, I mean, that's supposed to be against the rules. Like, what is this shit? Go back to the sex offender subreddit, buddy. What? Dude, you're literally, we could go into your comments, man. I hope Pixie wins her lawsuit, but I can't help but feel, oh man, this guy, he really hates, he doesn't want Destiny haters, guys. Guys, he doesn't want, looks like he was in 28 days ago at Destiny's thing talking about streamers that are hard stuck plat, which everybody knows. Destiny's hard stuck plat in League of Legends after like 20 years of playing, however long old that game is. Every single fucking one of these people are DGG or brigaders. Every single fucking one. It's hilarious watching this dude's complete metamorphosis from a relatively normal human being. He ran as a Republican. Like, they just speculate complete defamatory comments that are not true. It's like shocking. And this is how Destiny operates, by the way. Every single one of the points these people put into these comment sections, it's brigaded. They're all false, provably false. Harassment and defamation. They're clearly brigading the posts, and none of these people get banned. Like, at a certain point, what is the point of LSF? Every single person in here is literally a brigader to try to attack a person for covering the story of Destiny as a sex fucking criminal. Engagement manipulation, vote manipulation. I mean, like, come on, man. I guess we don't care about brigading anymore. Guys, in 2014, Mike considered himself a progressive instead of a socialist. No shit. Didn't that have to make a whole new LSF because one of the orbiters completely ruined the mod team? All I can say is this. I'm going to pledge whatever it takes to get justice for these victims.